Hello folks, this is Johnny French. We're recording another episode today at a different location of what's really happening in Corpus Christi. This is one of the places where it really happens. We're within the workshop, and today it's being used for an open house for the Gulf Coast Gem and Mineral Society, which, not coincidentally, is going to be working itself to death by the end of next month, because the Gem and Mineral Society has its annual show on the 1st and 2nd of March this year. And to give you an idea of the sort of things that may be going on there, we have a portion of this episode that demonstrates how to wire wrap gemstones, those that have already been turned into cabochons, into shapes that nature never dreamt of. And here are some of the materials from which those cabochons may be cut. We have materials here from India, Oregon, Poland, Mexico, a number of things. We've got some from Germany, Brazil, and Texas, Argentina, the Lake Superior area, even South Dakota. All of these things and more will be on display at the Gem and Mineral Show in March, the 1st and 2nd. They will be on display for those 2 days at the fairgrounds, the Borchard Fairgrounds in Robstown. And we hope you all come out to see them. If you're at all interested in this hobby, or if you just like beautiful things, be sure and come. My experiences in tumbling rocks, and a little bit about machines, and about finished products, and what you can achieve using a tumbler.
Mark.
I don't know when I started, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and this was the first machine that I got. It's a shaker kind of tumbler. I could plug it in and it just shakes. What I learned in using this kind of a tumbler is that it doesn't work well with slabs, with flat pieces of rock, because they just get in there and they just lay and they don't turn over. What I had the best success is like with smaller rocks, like pebbles. It works very well with that kind of rock. What you do is, well, and depending on what kind of machine that you're using, you have to follow the instructions for the machine as to how much rock you put into the tub, how much water you put in, and then how much grit you put in. So you have a mixture of rock, grit, and water. A rotary barrel tumbler, it's like you can put about, they say up to 6 pounds, but I think if you fill this tumbler, it's not going to move the rocks inside very well. So the instructions for this machine are to fill it about half full. And then when you add the water, you add water just below the surface of the rock. And I have a little sample of grit. This is, that's the coarse grit, 80 grit. You can actually see the little particles in that. So about 3 pounds of rock. Now, that may look like rock candy, but
don't bite it. I guess what I like about this kind of tumbler, and I have another one at home that has 2 barrels that run at the same time. So you can do more rock.
Where do you get the grit?
The grit, well, you can buy it. It's
You can get it at Harbor
commercially
Freight.
available different places.
Oh, okay.
Harbor Freight
Harbor Freight
carries
has
it in, Harbor Freight carries it in a packet that's got the 3 different grits in one little set.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Sometimes the club will buy it, and I think the last purchases, we got like 50 pounds of this grit, so. Once you put the rock and the water and the grit in, then on this one it has a hard metal lid with a rubber cover, and that fits in. I'm more used to doing this by myself, not in front of 100 people. And then you have a metal lid. And then a washer and a nut. You have to make sure that you get it down tight, because sometimes this lid can work off and then you'll have grit all over your garage floor. So it goes there like that.
Tell them why you should always put this one in the garage floor.
Pardon?
Tell them why you should always put this type in a garage floor.
Well, because you don't want to make a mess in the house.
Yeah, that has water in the grit, and if it does leak, once you turn it on, you check it. If it does leak, you're gonna have a pile of water and sludge on your floor, so you
Yeah. Well, have you been in my garage? I have.
Hazardous work area.
What I've learned by like Mark talks about making mistakes, and so one of the things that I've learned, because I can have 3 barrels going at the same time. So what I do is I make myself a chart. So I put down the date that I started, the number of the barrel, the size of the grit, and then I measure the amount of grit that I put in. So this one is like barrel 1, 600 grit. I may also make notes on what it is. I used to have a pretty good memory, but I found when I started doing this, I couldn't remember, well, what step was this barrel on, and when did I start it, and so I found I have to write it down.
Me too.
How long do you put something in a tumbler? How long does it stay in there?
I'd say usually maybe like 5 days, maybe 7, kind of depending on what you're starting with.
And
Like
those are tumbling
these-
consistently,
You
right?
never turn it off, it just stays on for 5
Yeah.
days straight, like just 24 hours for 5 days? Oh, wow.
Yes.
Mark, can I tell a story about that?
Yeah.
Can I tell a story about that?
If you want to.
One of the reasons you want it in the garage is because it is very noisy,
Oh, yeah.
Some friends of ours, when he first started tumbling, he would turn the machine on every morning, and he would come back every evening and the machine's running. Well, he would check it, but there's no progress. And it's supposed to be like 7 days, and this went on for a couple of weeks. Finally, one day, he told his wife, he said, well, this is not working very well. And she said, what? And he said, the tumbler. Oh, you mean that noisy thing out there in the back of the house? Says, I turn it off after you leave.
Oh, my God.
And I turn it on just about the time you get home. So they make a lot of noise, but they've got to run continuously.
I do,
Look at you.
if I go away for a weekend, sometimes I'll leave them running. You know, when I went to Europe for 3 weeks, I didn't run anything then. I have 3 rocks here, and they're this kind of rock, red jasper. The first one, that it has no markings on it, that's the way I picked it up alongside the road. This one has been in a tumbler in 80 grit for probably 5 or 6 days. And this one has gone into the second step with 220 grit, which is a finer grit. When you look at these stones, it's very hard to tell the difference. So that's why I write things down, because I can't remember. It depends on if these are all stream rounded. If you were, if you buy a tumbler like this and you get a kit with little packages of grit and a little box or container of broken rocks, rough, and they're rough on the edges. They don't tell you that it's going to take you a long time to break down the rocks that have the rough edges. So these will polish quicker. So then once I think that the stage is done, I'll take the barrel apart, and if you remember one thing from today, from this talk, you don't dump the water down the drain. I can show you. I gather it. If I have one, I'll use a 5-gallon pail and a common sieve, and I will pour everything out through that sieve and collect it in the pail. And then use the hose and wash the drum out very well and wash the rocks very well. Because if you're careless and you get the coarse grit into the next step, then it can scratch the rocks. So you do 600, 5 to 7 days, 220, and then the last grinding stage would be a 600 grit, which is really a very fine powder, maybe even finer than flour. And then after that, I use a polish, and I've kind of settled at the present time I'm using tin oxide polish. And again, the same, say, 5 to 7 days. So it can take a month from the time you start to when you get a finished batch. There's one other step. I use a Arm & Hammer soap. use a soap without perfume or any other additives. Dick suggested that I could use that with the polish, and I've done that. Sometimes I'll use the soap first and wash the stones, and you'd be surprised at how dirty that water is after you wash the stones and then polish them. So I don't know which of those combinations is best. I don't know how you could measure that. You know, you'd have to have some kind of fancy instrument that you could measure the reflection of the light. And I don't have anything like that.
One thing, if you have a bigger tumbler, it will generate gas, flammable gas. So you have to be careful when you open it.
Oh, you mean inside?
Pressure, yeah,
Depending on what you're tumbling.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I haven't had any problems like that yet.
Well, I have had.
You've got gas.
If you start looking for tumblers, you'll find that there's probably 100 different kinds.